My name is Christi York, and I create sculptural basketry. I hand harvest most of my own material and create sculptural works out of that natural material. I poked around and kind of did my own ad hoc education by taking classes locally, and also there is a basketry guild on Salt Spring Island, which is fairly close to where I live. And also down in the States, there's a basketry retreat once a year that's not too far away from here, and that happens on the peninsula kind of outside of Seattle. And that's fabulous because it's 5 days of all basket nerds converging on one area with a whole bunch of different teachers teaching different techniques, and that was absolutely invaluable for kind of finding my tribe, so to speak. In the sense of a basket making community, in that we're all quite spread out, but thanks to the internet we can connect. Yes, I consider myself part of a basket making community. People who are using basketry techniques, teaching basketry techniques, and I especially feel a kinship with the people who are harvesting their own natural materials. Not every basket maker does. You can buy commercial material, but yeah, we definitely hang out on Instagram and you know, comment on each other's harvesting techniques and whatnot, and say, you know, just jam back and forth on Instagram. And I have found Instagram to be an invaluable tool, absolutely invaluable tool for learning from other basket makers. It's incredible what you can learn now. Just on the internet, even versus 5 years ago when I first started. It was quite difficult to kind of track down basket making type people, and now I've gotten a much larger community around me that I can poke. Even if I have questions, they can ask me, I can ask them. It's been great that way. What inspires me to make art is it's more of as something that I can't stop doing. I can't not make art, and I think you'll probably get a similar answer from a lot of different artists that way. It's a compulsion. I'm lucky enough to have the time and space to dedicate to creating some of these sculptural pieces, because they're really non-functional. The piece for the show is inspired by the materials. A lot of my inspiration comes from the plant materials themselves. The edge of the basket is made from a material called contorted hazel, which is a type of hazel garden, a type of plant that grows in a lot of people's gardens, and it's has a really wonky curly edge to it. And then the weavers are a plant material called Virginia creeper, and it's just a very long vine. So I would say I'm definitely inspired by the materials themselves. When I look at the plants in nature, often that gives me a suggestion right away of what to do for the final piece. With learning basketry techniques, you are absolutely learning ancient techniques that go back in some cases to, believe it or not, pre-human. They've dated some twining techniques and making cordage, which is just basically plant fiber strung in together to make rope. They've dated that back to Neanderthal times now, and the date keeps getting pushed back even more, which is incredible. So I mean, in the sense of like really, really, really historical techniques, yeah, it's very important. And I think it's fascinating that every culture on the planet has their own tradition of basketry, using their own materials that grow around them. And also, if you're into the anthropological side of it, like the ethnobotany, you can even trace where materials were traded. If that material didn't grow in a region, you know, different people would trade for the different materials if it didn't grow there. So it's pretty fascinating once you drill down into it. One interesting thing that pops into my head is they've never invented a machine that can make a basket. Every single basket that you see, even the cheapy ones at Easter in the dollar store, the bright pink ones for a couple of bucks, those have been made by hand by somebody. I do actually enjoy the slow process of it. So there's definitely an upper limit to the technology that I'd be willing to embrace in my work, because it is such an ancient craft, and I go out and hand harvest everything myself. So to then kind of build a technological process in it to make it quicker almost goes against what I'm interested in. Just grew up in suburban Victoria. Yeah, that question I was pondering. I can't think of any other than being encouraged in a creative vein by my parents, but that it manifested itself more in graphic design. So that's where I spent kind of the first 20 years of my career, was graphic design and working on the computer. And I started down the handmade path as a way to get away from working on the computer years ago. Yeah, but I wouldn't say that my growing up in the community that I grew up in really had any influence on the work I'm doing now. It's more the paths I've discovered as an adult, and the paths that I've seeked out for myself are more what's influencing me now. It impacts it absolutely directly, 100%, because I am gathering natural material from my immediate environment. We've lived a couple of places on the island now. When we lived in Courtenay, we were surrounded by big leaf maple trees, which would drop their giant leaves in our backyard. And I was out there raking one day, looking at the stem on the big leaf maple, which can be very, very long. And I just started collecting those and drawing those as potential art material to play with, and then ended up doing a series. Where I live, like literally physically, will have an effect on what I'm making, because the big leaf maple leaves were landing in my backyard. That's the material I was using. Whereas where we've moved down here outside of Duncan, it's very hot and dry, and we're surrounded by arbutus trees and berry oak trees. So now I walk out my back door and I pick up arbutus bark, and I wonder what I can do with that. So the physical geography of where I live absolutely influences the material that I'm starting to play with and work with. I don't see a distinct style or aesthetic. I think there's themes. People and artists will be working with the natural material that is so abundant here. Wood is a great example of that, or just mixing wood into the final art piece. But yeah, yeah, definitely. There's a lot of natural material being used in British Columbia, but I wouldn't say that is a defining. I don't think that you can define most of the art coming out of the West Coast by that. Yeah, I'm really curious what other people have said about that. It's an interesting question.